The oldest name in all of human history does not belong to a king or a hero or a god. It belongs to an accountant. And here is the strange part. The thing his city invented is in your hand right now. His name, if it was a hymn and not simply the title of an office, was Kushim. We know it because someone pressed it into a tablet of clay at the city of Uruk about 5,000 years ago at the bottom of a receipt. And that receipt was not for gold or land or an army. It was, most likely, for beer. The technology that would one day carry every scripture, every law, every poem ever written, the technology carrying these words to you right now, was invented to keep track of grain. This is the story of writing, and it does not begin with a poet, it begins with a bookkeeper.
Last time, we watched the first city rise and end on a problem. A temple that owned half of Uruk, a king who taxed tens of thousands, could not run on memory alone. Durant called writing one of the great mental leaps of civilization, the moment the human mind learned to store itself outside the skull. He was right about what it became. But almost everyone gets the beginning wrong. We picture the first writer as a priest recording a prayer or a poet catching a song. The clay tells a different story, a story that starts not in a temple's holy of holies, but in its warehouse.
To find the beginning, you have to go back long before letters, to a small clay object the size of a coin. You have almost certainly never heard of it, and it may be one of the most important objects in this entire series. For thousands of years, as far back as 9,000 years ago, the farmers of the Near East kept track of their goods with little clay tokens, each shape standing for a thing: a cone for a small measure of grain, a sphere for a larger one, other shapes for sheep or oil. To record a deal, you gathered the right tokens, and to make it tamper-proof, you sealed them inside a hollow ball of clay, an envelope, which we call a bulla. But a sealed ball has a flaw. You can't see what's inside without breaking it. So people began pressing the tokens into the soft outer surface first, leaving their shapes on the outside. And there, in that small practical fix, someone had a revolution without knowing it.
Because once the marks on the outside told you everything, the tokens inside were pointless. Why seal counters in a ball at all? Just flatten the clay, press the signs, and you have a tablet. This is the famous idea of the scholar Schmandt-Besserat, that writing did not descend from heaven, but grew, step by practical step, out of accounting. It is the leading theory, though not every scholar accepts every link in the chain. By around 5,000 years ago, in Uruk, those pressed signs had become the first true script, what we call proto-cuneiform. And its very shape came from the tool. A scribe cut a reed to a wedge-shaped tip and pressed it into wet clay, and those little wedges gave the writing its name. Cuneiform simply means wedge-shaped. Now read the very oldest tablets, and you find no gods, no king's victories, no songs. You find rations, barley, beer, sheep. Lists of who was owed what by the temple. And not just some of the earliest tablets, the overwhelming majority. For the first long stretch of its life, writing was almost purely a machine for counting.
And here is the second surprise. It didn't happen only once. Writing was invented from scratch at least 4 separate times, in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, in China, and, far across an ocean, in Mesoamerica. Egypt's hieroglyphs appear almost at the same moment as Sumer's signs, around 5,000 years ago. China's and Mesoamerica's came later, and stranger still, so different in form that the people who made them cannot have copied one another. Which tells us that writing is not a fluke of one lucky genius. It is what a society does when it grows too large to remember. Wherever a state appears, a temple hoarding grain, a king collecting taxes, officials tracking who owes what, writing appears close behind, because power at scale simply cannot run on human memory. Writing, in other words, was not born from wonder, it was born from administration.
But then comes the turning point, that changes everything. For centuries, writing stayed a prisoner of the ledger, nothing but numbers, goods, and names. And then, slowly, it broke free. The same wedge-shaped marks that once counted barley learned to spell a king's boast, a god's hymn, a law, a letter home, a story about a hero and his fear of death. The account book became literature. The tool built to track a debt became the one thing that lets a human being who died 5,000 years ago still speak to you today. Which is exactly what Kushim, the accountant, is doing right now.
So writing is the hinge on which the whole human story turns. We even draw our great dividing line along it. Everything before writing we call prehistory, and everything after, history, as if the past only truly begins the moment someone starts keeping records. And in a sense, it does. Before writing, every thought, every promise, every law lived inside a human head and died when that head did. After writing, a mind could outlast its own body. A rule could bind people who would never meet the ruler. A story could outrun 1,000 years and arrive intact in your hands. The dead could teach the living. Strangers could trust one another across distances no voice could ever cross. It began as the dullest thing imaginable, a tally of grain, a receipt for beer, and it became the memory of our entire species. Every library, every archive, every hard drive on Earth is a descendant of one Sumerian clerk's need to remember how much beer he had handed out. The most human of all our powers, to remember, to promise, to tell a story that outlives us, grew quietly out of the most ordinary need there is, to keep count. Durant was right that the word is the vessel that carries civilization forward. He simply didn't know that the vessel started out as an invoice.
Next time on Civilization OS. While the scribes were pinning the world down in clay, other hands in the same cities were working a very different kind of magic, coaxing bright, hard metal out of dull gray stone with nothing but fire and breath. First copper, then the alloy that changed everything, bronze. The material that would sharpen the plow, arm the king, and finally bring the Stone Age to an end. The story of the first smiths and the metal that armed the first empires.